Thousands of years ago, completely disconnected civilizations separated by vast oceans and endless blistering deserts all sat down to write the exact same script of global annihilation. From the arid sands of the Middle East to the lush, fertile plains of ancient India, the greatest prophets in human history recorded an identical doomsday. We assume these ancient religious texts are merely creative myths or spiritual metaphors. But what if they are not predicting a future apocalypse at all? What if they are actually a buried collective memory of a terrifying cosmic event that already tore our sky apart? We are about to embark on a meticulously designed roadmap through the most powerful ancient texts on Earth. I have structured this journey so that every single apocalyptic vision we explore is far more terrifying, specific, and scientifically accurate than the last. We will begin by witnessing a violent storm of fiery artillery from the heavens. If you believe that humanity has already survived a global extinction event, drop a number 1 in the comments right now so we can see how many of you know the truth. As we venture deeper into this escalating nightmare, we will uncover a silent poison that slowly strangles the rivers before moving on to a blinding ancient weapon that explicitly mirrors a modern thermonuclear detonation. Finally, we will trace all these terrifying accounts back to one single forgotten source. How did the entire ancient world remember the exact same apocalypse? Let us find out. We begin our investigation into this global doomsday memory by opening one of the most widely read and powerful religious texts in human history. The Quran paints a deeply disturbing picture of the end times, formerly known as Qiyamah, or the Day of Judgment. But when you strip away the theological interpretations and read the literal physical descriptions of this catastrophic event, you quickly realize you are not reading a simple spiritual metaphor. You are reading a terrifyingly accurate eyewitness account of a sudden massive cosmic impact. If you think you could somehow find shelter and survive a sudden relentless bombardment of fiery debris violently raining down from the sky, press number 2 right now. According to the ancient scriptures, the apocalypse absolutely does not begin with a slow, gradual decline or a subtle warning sign. It begins with absolute terrifying violence, striking directly from above. The atmosphere itself is physically described as violently splitting open and tearing apart. The familiar stars in the night sky suddenly lose their comforting light and are scattered, crashing down to the surface of the earth like explosive artillery shells. The text explicitly describes a devastating rain of something called sigil, which roughly translates to hard stones of baked clay or superheated brimstone. These glowing projectiles relentlessly bombard the planet, aggressively crushing every single man-made structure and instantly igniting a massive, unstoppable global firestorm that consumes everything in its path. The sheer impressive factor of this specific ancient description is the absolute blinding speed and the unrelenting physical violence of the destruction. It does not describe a magical flood slowly rising or a mystical plague spreading through a city. It describes the exact terrifying atmospheric mechanics of a massive cosmic body violently penetrating our fragile atmosphere. When a large asteroid or a dense cluster of meteors enters the Earth's atmosphere at speeds exceeding 40,000 miles per hour, it aggressively compresses the air directly in front of it, creating an unimaginable thermal heat wave. The friction is so intense that the sky literally appears to rip open as the atmosphere violently burns. The massive space rock superheats to thousands of degrees, glowing violently before shattering into a chaotic shotgun blast of flaming debris that rains down exactly like the cursed stones of baked clay described so meticulously centuries ago. The deeply unexplained and genuinely chilling element here is how an ancient civilization living in the 7th century could so perfectly articulate the exact physical sequence of a massive asteroid airburst. They absolutely did not have advanced telescopes to track near-Earth objects or modern supercomputers to accurately model kinetic impact physics. Yet the exact chronological order of the disaster is flawlessly recorded. First, the blinding flash and the tearing of the sky. Then the terrifying falling of darkened stars. Finally, the raining of superheated heavy rock and the resulting firestorm that aggressively engulfs the entire landscape. The ancient text reads exactly like a panicked, traumatized survivor, desperately trying to describe a catastrophic meteor shower that completely annihilated their world in a matter of terrifying, chaotic seconds. This sudden fiery bombardment is a horrifying display of absolute power. But this is only the very first stage of the planetary apocalypse. When the blazing sky finally goes dark and the violent explosions permanently stop, a completely different nightmare instantly begins. If the violent burning sky was the immediate loud cause of destruction, what incredibly slow and completely silent killer quietly crept in right after the firestorm to choke the remaining life out of the bleeding planet? When the violently burning sky of the Islamic prophecies finally goes dark, and the deafening atmospheric explosions permanently stop, a completely different nightmare instantly begins. If the fiery bombardment was the immediate, loud cause of planetary destruction, the Judeo-Christian texts introduce a slow, completely silent killer that quietly creeps in right after the firestorm to choke the remaining life out of the bleeding planet. We are now turning the heavy pages of the Bible, specifically the apocalyptic book of Revelation, to witness a cosmic horror that absolutely does not rely on sheer kinetic force. Before we uncover the exact chemical terror hidden deep inside this ancient biblical prophecy, please take a quick moment to subscribe to our channel. By joining us today, you ensure you never miss our continuing deep dives into the absolute darkest, most mysterious secrets of human history. In the haunting book of Revelation, the Apostle John describes a terrifying vision that is triggered the exact moment the third angel sounds his heavenly trumpet. He writes that a massive, great star, blazing fiercely like a giant roaring torch, suddenly falls from the deep, dark cosmic heavens. But this falling star does not violently shatter the earth or crush entire ancient cities under a heavy rain of fire. The ancient text gives this specific celestial object a deeply ominous and highly specific name: wormwood. Instead of exploding upon impact, wormwood silently crashes down and completely dissolves into exactly 1/3 of the major rivers and the hidden underground fresh springs of water across the entire globe. The sheer impressive factor of this specific prophecy is its chilling focus on the horrific, lingering aftermath of a cosmic event rather than the initial physical impact. The book of Revelation explicitly describes a completely agonizing, slow-motion planetary extinction. The fallen star turns the fresh drinking water intensely bitter, dark, and highly toxic. The surviving human population does not die from a massive explosive shockwave or collapsing stone buildings. Instead, they are forced to helplessly wander a burning, desolate landscape, slowly dying of severe dehydration or violently choking to death after desperately drinking the heavily cursed water. It is a slow, methodical, and entirely quiet mass extinction brought on by extreme environmental contamination. The deeply unexplained and genuinely terrifying element here is the stunning scientific accuracy of this biblical account. How could an ancient prophet, writing nearly 2,000 years ago on the remote island of Patmos, perfectly describe the exact chemical fallout of a major asteroid strike? When a massive, heavy, metal-rich asteroid violently impacts the Earth, it vaporizes millions of tons of sulfur, iridium, and toxic alien minerals directly into the upper stratosphere. This highly toxic ash heavily pollutes the sky, completely blocking out the sun and ultimately returning to the surface as highly concentrated, deadly acid rain. This real-world astrophysical phenomenon literally turns global freshwater systems completely toxic, poisoning major rivers and underground aquifers exactly as the terrifying wormwood prophecy vividly describes. The ancients were not writing a fantasy. They were scientifically describing severe heavy metal poisoning and acid rain from an asteroid impact. While the ancient texts of the West and the Middle East perfectly recorded the fiery atmospheric entry and the silent, toxic chemical fallout of a falling star, a completely different perspective was being recorded far to the east. If the Bible accurately described the slow poisoning of the world, what ancient Eastern text described a terrifying, blinding weapon capable of instantly vaporizing entire armies in a single flash of impossible heat? While the ancient texts of the West and the Middle East perfectly recorded the slow, silent, toxic chemical fallout of a falling star, a completely different perspective was simultaneously being recorded far to the east. If you want to uncover a terrifying ancient weapon capable of instantly vaporizing entire massive armies in a single flash of impossible heat, press number 3 right now. Forget the slow, agonizing death of poisoned rivers for a moment and look directly into the blinding light of absolute instant destruction. Deep within the sacred ancient Sanskrit verses of the legendary Indian epic known as the Mahabharata lies a terrifying account of a disaster that completely defies any standard historical explanation. The ancient text meticulously details the catastrophic deployment of a supreme divine weapon called the Brahmastra. The detailed verses absolutely do not describe a normal primitive battle using storms of iron arrows or swinging iron swords. Instead, they vividly describe a single magnificent projectile charged with all the devastating power of the universe. When this terrifying weapon finally detonates, it unleashes an incandescent column of dark smoke and roaring flame as bright as 10,000 suns rising in all their glorious splendor simultaneously. The Mahabharata explicitly names this apocalyptic blaze the Samvartika fire. It describes a blinding, furious shockwave of unimaginable heat that instantly sweeps across the chaotic battlefield. Massive, heavily armored war elephants charging cavalry units and entire towering stone cities are violently vaporized into fine gray ash right in the middle of a single terrified heartbeat. The sheer impressive factor of this highly specific ancient Hindu account is how flawlessly it mirrors the exact physical mechanics of a modern thermonuclear detonation or a massive hypervelocity kinetic impact. A massive asteroid striking the planet does not merely throw giant rocks around. It instantly converts unimaginable kinetic energy into a blinding flash of pure thermal radiation. The ambient temperature of the atmosphere instantly spikes to thousands of degrees. The water in nearby rivers and deep lakes literally boils away into rising steam, and the raw thermal radiation violently hurls a massive invisible shockwave that completely flattens absolutely everything within a blast radius of hundreds of miles. But the truly unexplained and deeply chilling element of the Mahabharata is exactly what happens after the blinding fiery flash finally fades. The ancient text explicitly describes the horrifying long-term aftermath of the Brahmastra. Survivors of the initial devastating blast do not simply walk away unharmed. The text meticulously notes that their hair and fingernails mysteriously begin to fall out. Their clay pots crack for no reason, their food supplies become completely poisoned, and unborn children are severely deformed inside the womb. Thousands of years before the Manhattan Project successfully split the atom and modern scientists finally understood the horrific biological effects of radiation poisoning, an ancient Indian epic perfectly described the exact horrifying symptoms of severe acute radiation sickness and toxic environmental fallout. The ancient scribes writing these epic verses were clearly struggling to accurately describe a blast of sudden thermal energy so incredibly massive that it completely broke their understanding of the natural world. They witnessed a flash of light that melted solid stone and permanently poisoned the very soil beneath their feet. This blinding fury perfectly aligns with the catastrophic thermal radiation generated by a massive cosmic impact event. But when the explosive shockwaves finally dissipate and the intense radioactive heat slowly fades away, what profound, completely silent cosmic horror quietly waits at the exact end of time? As the violent explosive shockwaves of the Indian epics finally dissipate and the intense radioactive heat slowly fades away, a profoundly silent cosmic horror quietly waits at the exact end of time. If a slow, agonizing thermal death under an impossibly bright sky sounds like the absolute ultimate planetary nightmare, press number 4 right now. Turning away from sudden kinetic impacts and radioactive warfare reveals an entirely different apocalyptic timeline hidden deep within the ancient Pali canon of Buddhism. Specifically, the ancient Sattasurya Sutta, widely known as the Discourse on the Seven Suns, completely abandons the concept of a rapid, chaotic, global punishment. It introduces a creeping, methodical desiccation of the entire globe. This ancient Buddhist scripture meticulously describes a terrifying thermal death that unfolds over an incomprehensibly vast period of time. According to these sacred texts, the absolute end of the world is not marked by a sudden blinding flash or a rapid rain of explosive brimstone. Instead, the apocalypse arrives with the terrifying, gradual appearance of 7 separate suns burning ominously in the sky. As each new sun slowly ignites in the atmosphere, the global temperature steadily and violently rises to unimaginable extremes. The ancient text meticulously details how all plant life instantly withers into ash. It describes the massive global oceans eventually boiling away completely, leaving behind nothing but vast, barren seabeds of cracked salt. The sheer impressive factor of this specific prophecy is the terrifying scale of the geographical destruction. The text explicitly states that even the absolute highest and most permanent mountain ranges on the planet, including the mighty Himalayas, will slowly melt away exactly like soft liquid candle wax under the unrelenting atmospheric heat. There are absolutely no raging storms, no deafening thunderclaps, and no chaotic battles. It is just an endless, suffocating silence as the entire planet is methodically baked into a completely sterile, floating cinder of dead rock. Every single drop of moisture is violently stripped from the atmosphere, ensuring that absolutely no biological life can possibly survive the transition. The truly unexplained and deeply chilling element of the Sattasurya Sutta is its flawless, terrifying alignment with modern astrophysics. Thousands of years before modern radio telescopes could observe the complex life cycles of distant stars, These ancient monks perfectly described the exact death sequence of a solar system. When the Earth's sun eventually exhausts its hydrogen fuel, it will violently expand into a massive red giant. From the surface of the planet, this expanding, dying star will literally consume the entire horizon, appearing as a massive, multiplying fiery presence in the scorching sky. It will systematically bake the globe, permanently evaporating the oceans and literally melting the solid planetary crust exactly as the Satisuriya Sutta vividly detailed centuries ago. This is not merely a confused description of a localized meteor strike. It is an impossibly accurate cosmological projection of the absolute final death of the physical solar system. All of these widely disconnected texts brilliantly describe blinding fire, impossible heat, and terrifying falling stars. From the rapid kinetic bombardment of the Quran to the poisoned waters of the Bible and the radioactive blasts of the Vedas, humanity shares one exact apocalyptic memory. But what if all of these horrifying accounts are simply fractured echoes? If every major world religion remembers the exact same fiery end, what single, entirely forgotten ancient faith actually holds the original, terrifying blueprint for them all? All of those deeply terrifying accounts of poisoned rivers, blinding radioactive flashes, and slowly boiling oceans ultimately trace back to a single, much older source. If discovering the absolute oldest apocalyptic source code in human history deeply excites your curiosity, press number 5 right now. To truly understand why entirely disconnected ancient civilizations somehow share the exact same fiery doomsday memory, one must look deep into the ancient Avesta, the highly sacred texts of Zoroastrianism. As one of the absolute oldest recorded religions ever practiced on Earth, Zoroastrianism contains a highly detailed foundational prophecy known specifically as Frashokharedi. This ancient Persian text does not just describe a localized flood, a short drought, or a single burning city. It meticulously details a violent, inescapable global geological reset. The prophecy explicitly states that a massive celestial comet named Gochir will violently strike the planet from the cosmos. Upon this catastrophic, earth-shattering impact, the planetary crust will aggressively fracture, instantly unleashing a literal, massive river of boiling molten metal that completely engulfs the entire globe. This planetary flood of glowing, superheated magma is said to physically melt the highest mountain ranges, aggressively reshaping the solid tectonic crust to violently burn away all human corruption and completely purify the landscape. The sheer impressive factor of this highly specific ancient text is its absolute historical supremacy and profound cultural influence. Because Zoroastrianism predates almost all major modern world religions by centuries, the terrifying atmospheric imagery found within the Avesta actively serves as the original, horrifying blueprint for every single doomsday script that ultimately followed. The burning, falling sulfur of the Islamic texts, the highly toxic falling stars of the Christian Bible, and the impossible, blinding thermal heat of the ancient Hindu epics all perfectly echo the exact catastrophic elements originally recorded in this single Persian prophecy. It essentially functions as the absolute root source code for the global apocalypse. The deeply unexplained and genuinely horrifying element of this realization is what it actually implies about forgotten human history. When one actively strips away the ancient theological framing, the angels, and the divine judgment, and looks strictly at the physical events described, a terrifying scientific reality immediately emerges. A massive, heavy comet violently striking the Earth, instantly cracking the deep tectonic plates, and unleashing a massive global tsunami of subterranean magma is exactly what would physically happen during an extinction-level cosmic impact event. These ancient religious texts are absolutely not attempting to predict a mystical, terrifying future punishment. Instead, they are panicked, highly disjointed survivor accounts of a genuine, prehistoric cataclysm. They represent the deeply traumatized, fragmented historical records of a massive meteor impact that actually wiped out an advanced ancient human civilization deep in the forgotten, foggy past. Humanity did not just creatively invent the terrifying end of the world out of thin air to frighten disobedient populations. For thousands of years, religious scholars have passionately debated the exact spiritual meaning behind these deeply violent scriptures. They endlessly argued over metaphors, divine laws, and heavenly retribution. Yet, the brutal physical reality has always been hiding in plain sight, deliberately masked by ancient mythological language. The terrifying apocalypse is absolutely not a dark, imaginative prophecy patiently waiting to happen. It is a brutal, violently suppressed historical record. The world has entirely ended before, and the traumatized human survivors simply wrote down exactly what they saw falling from the burning sky. The journey through these ancient religious texts reveals a deeply terrifying and undeniably shared nightmare. From the violent atmospheric firestorms of the Middle East to the poisoned waters of the West, and from the blinding flashes of the East to the molten reset of ancient Persia, humanity shares a single traumatic memory. Before uncovering the absolute most crucial lesson these traumatized ancestors desperately tried to pass down, please take a quick moment to subscribe to the channel so you can continue exploring the darkest unsolved mysteries of human civilization. When modern scientific minds analyze these apocalyptic scriptures, the focus remains almost entirely on the physical destruction. However, every single one of these ancient traditions intricately tied the falling sky directly to human morality. The flaming brimstone of Islamic prophecies, the poisoned wormwood star of the Bible, and the molten purification of the Avesta did not strike the earth randomly. In every historical account, the devastating cosmic catastrophe only happened when human character became completely corrupt. The ancients firmly believed that the violent physical destruction of the world was simply a harsh mirror reflecting the internal destruction of the human soul. When advanced societies became completely consumed by unchecked greed, overwhelming arrogance, and profound moral decay, the universe instinctively responded with a violent geological purge. This is the ultimate forgotten warning hidden beneath the terrifying descriptions of melting mountains and boiling oceans. The ancient prophets were not just terrified survivors writing down the exact mechanics of an asteroid strike. They were traumatized historians desperately trying to warn future generations that great civilizations do not merely die from falling rocks. They die from within long before the fire ever arrives. The fiery global reset only happens when the collective human character completely rots away, making the apocalypse a tragic but necessary planetary purification. Today, modern society builds towering steel skyscrapers, relies on advanced global digital networks, and proudly claims absolute mastery over the natural world. Humanity arrogantly assumes it has entirely outgrown these primitive ancient moral warnings. But as global greed rapidly expands and basic human empathy continues to aggressively fracture, one must look up at the silent cosmos and ask a terrifying question. If the ancient world was violently wiped clean only after it completely lost its moral compass, is modern civilization walking that exact same doomed path, silently summoning the next great fire from the sky?